All right, well, we'll get started. If you can't hear me, I do have this microphone, but I hate using microphones, so I'm going to try to avoid it. Thank you for being here this evening. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. Ultimately, my goal for this evening is to just give you the background information on Alice, why we're making the switch, what the program's all about, some of the key terms and phrases you're going to hear. Mostly because when we start talking about it with the children, I don't want you coming home and saying, today I talked about active shooters in school. Right? The goal here is to make you informed so that you can have appropriate conversation. Alice stands for alert, lockdown, inform, counter, and evacuate. The biggest thing to keep in mind through the night here as I talk about these is this is not a sequential program. You do not have to do these in this chronological order. Okay? Each adult in the school has to make a decision based on the information provided to them and where they are in location to whatever event might be going on. So I'm going to talk about them in this order because that's how they're laid out, but they do not have to happen in this order. Many of them, such as alert and inform, are continuous. Okay? If you see something, you say something. We kind of keep that information flowing so that at each moment we can be making the best decision possible for our students to keep them alive and safe and out of harm's way. So it's an option-based response to an active shooter situation or an intruder situation. Okay? The idea is that it empowers the individual in charge to make the best decision for their class. Right? And where Alice comes from is the FBI, CIA, all the organizations that are involved in these types of things have been doing scientific research. They've been studying these people. They've been studying these events. They've been looking at some of the commonalities, and what they found is there are no commonalities. No two situations were alike. But we are recognizing that there were opportunities for folks to make different decisions and ultimately still be around with us today. And the one that I'll share, because I think it helps to have the story, is when we take the training, Miss B and I are certified trainers, they play an audio tape of the librarian from Columbine High School. And she's sitting there, and she can hear the shooter coming, and she's got about 20 kids in the library, and she recognizes that the shooter is coming towards her. So there's an exit in her library about 75 steps from where she is, but she had been trained to keep the kids stationary, to keep them down, and to wait for further instruction. So ultimately, all of those folks could be with us today had they gone with their common sense and gone out the exit. Unfortunately, she did exactly what she's supposed to do. She stayed calm and followed protocol, and none of those folks are here with us today. And I know that's a gut-wrenching story, and it's such a somber way to open the evening, but it gives you a sense of where this research is coming from. And there's all kinds of information like that. Virginia Tech is another great example. Students in the first two rooms, the doors were unlocked. Shooter came in, shot people, left, went down the hall. The further he got, more doors were locked, went back to the first two rooms and continued to cause havoc and harm to those folks there because they were easy targets. So we hope to never be in that kind of situation. We hope never to be dealing with that. But we also recognize that the protocols we've had in place prior to Alice are not the best protocols for the safety of our children, and so it's time to make a change. One of the things I also want to point out is that adults are making changes on the fly. As more information becomes available, they might change something they're doing in the protocol. So as you see, each step is its own activity, but at any given time, if information changes, an adult can flip from one particular choice to another if they can do it safely and without harming anyone around. So why Alice, right? So it's a set of concepts developed for people to survive a violent critical incident. Okay, the length of a violent critical incident is typically 4 to 7 minutes. Police response time is average 8 to 11 minutes. So you can see that math doesn't add up really well. So the whole point of Alice is to give us more time, is to allow us to be able to keep that response time for a police to come and intervene and help support our students. And you can see Alice is in 4,200 schools, and that's probably not even accurate anymore because people are implementing it every day. Alice is becoming one of the most popular trainings that's out there. It's also being done in businesses and hospitals nationwide as well. In fact, Copley Hospital in Barrie just picked it up as their safety protocol as well. And one of the things I should say that's not in this slideshow, but just a little bit of peace of mind, that actually schools are not the number one location where active shootings happen, is actually places of work. So some positive news here as we go through this. We are number 2 on the list. We're going to try to slide down as quickly as we can, but so that's just good to know. So 1958, why is that date up there? Okay. It's the last time a student in a United States school died from a fire. Okay? And you're still doing fire drills today, right? We do a fire drill every other month in all schools, public schools, private schools, Catholic schools. So it's been, well, I can do some math. It's been a long time. I won't spare you my horrible calculations with fingers in the air and all that stuff. But we're still doing fire drills because we understand that repetition, that continuous practice, that knowledge that says, if this ever were to happen, here's the response. So there's not thinking, so there's not decision making, so there's just response, is key. Alice is in the same vein. The idea is over time to continue to practice, so when that panic situation hits, we're not thinking about what's happening, we're just responding with what we know. So the first of many steps is alert. Okay, we want initial awareness. There are some examples up there. Some of the things we're looking for: screaming, gunfire, announcements, loud sounds that don't seem normal, someone who can identify themselves, right? Not everything trips into the immediate response, but these are things we're looking for, right? We have a very warm and welcoming community. We're often very friendly. You open the door, you hold it open for the person behind you. Sometimes you don't know who that person is, you just assume they have business here. Okay, it's natural habit, right? That's what a good person does. You see someone, you hold the door open for them. But we have to be careful. Who are these people? Do we know them? We had a situation here before our door locks changed where a woman came in, said she was interested in the school, and ended up wandering around and stealing money out of professional wallets, was just in and out of classrooms where nobody was. Came in under the guise of another parent saying, oh, I'm here to find out more about the school. Parent let them in very casually, thinking that's something that happens here. And then was discovered wandering around aimlessly doing things that she shouldn't have been doing. So we have to be careful. We live in a world, unfortunately, where that is something that we face every day. So again, we want to be there. Your voice is your best tool, right? We want to get the kids and the adults to get into the habit of saying something. That doesn't seem like it makes sense to me. I need to say something to somebody. We don't want anyone being like, they must work here, they belong, they're a volunteer. If they're not sure, we want to get them in the habit of making sure, hey, Mrs. Katazi, I saw someone. What do you think about this? Do you know why they're here? We have visitors. They all wear visitor passes. I don't know if you've ever noticed them. We keep a nice bin right by the door. They're bright orange and pink. They're beautiful. Okay, so we make sure anyone who's here that belongs has a pass. So a kid's looking and they don't know there's a visitor pass visible, they know that person belongs here. So we have identifiers for that purpose. Right? The big change is that we use plain language. We're not doing code words anymore. Okay? Many of you were in schools, you did trainings and drills where there was a certain phrase that said a certain, the eagle lands at midnight, as we like to say, or the ice is slippery when wet, or whatever it might have been, to try to not alert or alarm people. But we've recognized that that's very confusing. If you're here volunteering for lunch and someone gets over the loudspeaker and says the clown is in the fox hen or whatever silly code you might have, you don't know what that means. You then cannot protect yourself against what might be going on, and you become not of any use to us. If someone comes in and you say, there's an armed intruder wearing a gray sweatshirt, you now have information that can help you not only save yourself, but if you're near kids, you can help them make a good choice, and you can work with them to be safe if you know what you're looking for. So that's a big deal for our kids. When you have kids 3 years old, 4 years old, and they start hearing those words, it's a huge, 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 huge deal. So we want to make sure, I can't stress that piece enough. But again, we have many visitors. Even a night like tonight, if something were to happen and I start shouting code words, there's 5 people in the room who know what to do, and the rest of us are stuck sort of trying to follow us and figure it out. So it's really important that we're very clear. So that's a big change from a lot of other safety protocols. Clear, plain language. It also goes back to adults. Okay? As this event's unfolding, if another adult recognizes another feature, okay, so-and-so sees the man in the gray sweatshirt and notices he's wearing high tops, they can add that. Every teacher in their room can use their phone that's in their room to talk over the PA system. So if I'm safely in my room and I see the man in the gray sweatshirt, I can call the office quietly, or if there's an emergency, I can hit some buttons and I can be on the PA saying, I just saw the man in the gray sweatshirt near the library. I just saw the man in the gray sweatshirt near the cafeteria. That now opens up a whole other possibility of options for those folks in other parts of the building to decide what particular aspect they want to use. So it's huge. We want to give that real-time information about what's going on. We want people to know what they're looking for and what to be on the lookout for. So lockdown, this is something we've done for a long time. The traditional lockdown worked as so. We locked the door, we turned off the lights, we drew the shades, and we huddled in the corner in a spot where we couldn't be seen if you were walking in the building. So all of our doors have the little glass window, so we would try to sit in the inside corner so if you looked through the window, you would think no one was there. Well, Couple of things wrong with that. Number one, if you're an intruder in a school and all the lights are out and all the shades are drawn and no one's making any sound, you kind of suspect something's going on, right? Number two, if someone does get in and you're all sitting in a corner, it's much easier for me to cause you bodily harm if you're all in a nice little compact area than if you're spread out in an area. So we've recognized some of the issues with that. So we still use the lockdown. Obviously, slowing down an intruder by having a locked door is important. But we also recognize an armed intruder can get through any lock they wish using the automatic or weapon or whatever they have to get through the door. So we've added a few pieces. Okay, so we're still locking the door, we're still turning off the lights, we're still drawing the shades to make it more difficult for them to locate us, but we're also barricading the door. As you can see in this beautiful picture, that stool and desk is not a barricade we practice. It just gives you a visual. That was a barricade that would not work. Okay. We also spread out. If someone is to get in the room, we want to make it as hard as possible for them to inflict mass casualties. Most people who come to do damage in schools typically are not after one target. Very seldomly do they enter a building saying, I want to get this one person. Most of the time they're looking to get mass casualties. If that's not easily accessible, they're moving on to another location in an attempt to do that. Okay. We're also now considering alternative escape routes, which I'll cover here in a couple of minutes as another step. And then we're trying to call 911. That should be happening in multiple locations. Again, the whole point of alert is to let you know what's going on. As soon as there's alert, multiple people have the right to call 911. That's initiating the response that much faster. In the previous protocol, we were asked to sit quietly and make no sound. Well, when you make no sound, no one's calling 911. No one's alerting anyone. And so that response time of 8 to 11 minutes can easily be stretched out to significantly longer if that doesn't happen. Ms. B, can you run up and grab one of the buckets from the second floor? I forgot to grab one in my setup. So inform. Going back to that initial alert. After that initial alert, people start moving. Everything is changing. People are making decisions. So the idea is that if you are in a spot where you can provide more details, you do. Okay, as I mentioned before, someone sees the man in the gray sweatshirt, noticing he's wearing blue pants, noticing he has high tops, noticing he is wearing an earring or a toque or whatever it might be. Not everybody will be able to react the same. So the more information we have, and like any situation, as you're locking your door, pulling your shades, you don't know where that person is. So you might think the initial safest thing for me to do is be in a lockdown and protect myself, and then you wait. You're sitting there quietly. You don't have any information. Not only is that scary for you as an adult, but it's very scary for your children. And you start second-guessing yourself, right? Common sense says, I want to take care of my children. What do I do? Can I leave? Can I not leave? Am I safe? Am I not safe? So we want to continue to pass along information in real time. The goal ultimately is to make sure that when you make your decision, you have all the information at your disposal, so you're not saying, oh, it sounds safe, it looks safe, and then you open the door, and unfortunately that particular person is coming around the corner or going by. Any of the faculty and staff can tell you about our training and the time we took to go through all these and to do it, and I, obviously being the trainer, I got to cheat a little bit, but a couple of times people tried to use some escape routes that I knew they were going to use, and I was able to get many, many people because there was less information being passed, because it's still not part of our vernacular. You're just thinking, what do I need to do to get out? But that information is vital to the safety and the decision-making process. And again, someone in the library is dangerous, but that allows someone in third grade or first grade at the end of the hallway to get out the back door and eliminate that many more targets that person would have. So really important that we try with, again, considering your own safety and the safety of your students first. We wouldn't want anyone roaming around saying, oh, let me see what's going on. Let me see how I can help. This would be, I'm sitting by the door and I see the feet walk by, or I hear the jingle, or I hear a sound, and I know that that person has moved by. I can say, hey, a minute ago, so-and-so walked by. The nice part about being able to call from the rooms is that that person on the outside is not going to have any indication of where it's coming from. It's not like a little light goes off. It's just ding and something comes over the intercom. It also stresses them out. They now know they're getting real-time information. The element of surprise is a huge one when it comes to mass casualty events. If you don't know what's coming, you can't be prepared. So this step really helps to take away that surprise element from the perpetrator. It kind of provides them less security and more concern, like, wow, they know where I am. Oh, someone just said I'm over here. So it really interrupts their process if they're getting that real-time information. Again, this step really all involves making sure you're doing it when you are safe and when the students are safe. So sometimes you won't be in a position. If you think someone's outside your door, you're not running up to the phone to say, hey, he's right next door. Like that's not how this works. But the more information we have about location and what's going on, the better off we can be. So the counter is really for older students, not so much for our younger students, but it's an important one. One of the things we've recognized, was that?
Sorry.
That's okay. I don't want to miss anything, so if I miss anything, don't worry. What we've recognized, and I'm going to show you a slide here in a moment that'll make it a little bit more clear, is that we don't have to be idle targets. If for some reason we barricaded and the perpetrator breaks through our barricade and enters the room, we don't have to sit there and just wait for this activity to occur. We have lots of great things that we have at our disposal in our classrooms that can really interrupt the ability of the shooter to do what he's attempting to do. So you see some of them up there, notebooks, water bottles, staplers. There's all kinds of materials. One of the things they recommend to students that are slightly older is to throw things to create that distraction. And again, I'll show you in a minute why we do that. And this was something I had never heard or had never thought about, so it was a real eye-opener for me. But again, the idea being, when you're in an active shooting event, most of the time you're not dealing with someone who has a lot of experience with arms, right? You're not dealing with someone who's out back working on their shooting technique. So they're very new to this. So anything we can do to get them off their mental game, to make it harder for them to focus, gives us more time and potentially allows us to take control of the situation. Now, we would not ever ask any of our students to be in a situation where they would one-on-one physically attack this gentleman. They do have some techniques that they call swarming, but that would be mostly only for older kids. Like, we're not, even though I think if I sent 20 kindergartners at an active shooter, they'd take them down. That's not the protocol we're going to be preaching, right? The idea is we have some 7th and 8th graders who are quite large and could, if given the opportunity, could get involved and kind of knock someone off their feet or kind of push or shove or tackle. They're really talking about high schools in this situation where you have big, large, burly athletes who could easily, manhandle. And often the people we see perpetrating these events are students, so they're of average size and of average weight. Certainly if there was an adult involved, that changes things a little bit, but certainly throwing things and creating that distraction can allow also an adult to intervene. When we did our situation, I was obviously the intruder, and I came through a room through a side door, and one of the adults there screamed in my face and pushed me back through the door and actually subdued me pretty quickly because I just wasn't expecting it. I came to the door, the adult was there screaming at me. I kind of was taken, I didn't lose, it just took a second to kind of think what was happening. Before I knew it, I was in the other room, and she was kind of had her hands on me and was manipulating the weapon that I had. And it's surprising, any of you have ever been scared by your children on purpose because they think it's funny from around a corner, that sudden sort of few seconds of whoa, and then you're like, okay, I know what's going on, that wasn't funny, leave me alone. But that couple of seconds can really alter an entire situation. If you're about to, shoot a gun, you get hit in the head with a stapler, it's going to throw you off. It's not going to deter you permanently, but that few seconds can buy some more time for us to make other decisions and to get involved. So here's why. The OODA loop. These are the things that happen anytime you do any activity. We start with observe, right? We need to see what's going on. I come in a room, I look around, I see what's going on. This happens in a matter of a few seconds. Right? Then I orient myself. Where am I? What am I doing? Right? I can't just plow through the door and figure it out. I look around, I see what's going on. Then we decide, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And then obviously we do the action. This is very quick. This is not minutes and minutes. This is maybe 2 seconds total. But if we can interrupt that loop, if we can distract someone who's observing or trying to orient themselves by throwing things, by making noises, by pushing and shoving, by whatever means, we slow that down. Every millisecond we slow that down buys us that much more time to respond. If I'm come in a room and I get hit by a stapler and I kind of orient myself, maybe there's an adult there with some other item hitting me, and all of a sudden I'm down and the gun's away, and we put an end to this. Most active shooter events are ended by folks on the inside, people in the building at the time, because of these types of things. Something that happened, they come across the wrong room, open the wrong door, an adult intervenes, or the kids kind of do this and it throws them off, and then an adult's able to support that. So again, this is obviously age appropriate. We're not asking little kids to counter, but we might ask them to scream. I might say to a bunch of 4-year-olds, when you see someone you're not sure of, scream as loud as you can. Because even that noise, as we all know, is something that's going to distract us, right? We've been doing it for years at basketball games. It's time for a free throw, we scream, we clap, we wave little balloons, anything to get that person off. It's the same philosophy that we use in any activity, just applied here. So it's really, really important to be trying to do that. So the counter is really trying to interrupt that loop. It's trying to get some way that we can safely, without jumping in front of or putting ourselves in harm's way, slow that loop down to provide us another opportunity. The counter aspect of this is very last resort. Okay, we're not sending out a mob of people at the beginning of an event to say, you all grab something, let's go find this person, right? The idea is you're in your room, you've done what you've been asked to do for protocol, you haven't felt like you've had enough information to escape or evacuate. All of a sudden, the intruder is at your door, you recognize he's going to come in any moment. Rather than sitting there and being inactive, we want to be prepared when we try these things. Again, slow that down and perhaps buy ourselves some time. And in a lot of cases, it can end the event right then and there. Then we hope what we're mostly using is the evacuate. Ultimately, we can't be in harm's way if we're not in the area that's where the harm is happening. So this is obviously the number one choice we want to use, and that's why I said Alice is not sequential, right? Obviously, the alert is going to happen first, we hope, but if, let's say there's not, someone gets in, we don't understand, we don't see it, all of a sudden we hear a gunshot, we're now reacting. If I know I'm in a place where I can escape because I heard a gunshot downstairs and I know I can go out a different door, you don't have to wait for all those other things to happen. We get ourselves out of harm's way as soon as we can. But again, ultimately, the goal is to get yourself out of the building into a safe place. In this particular activity, they do not expect us to walk in straight lines. They do not think we're going to move as a group. We will be teaching the kids a rally point. We will have a location here on campus. For us, it's going to be up by Father's garage because it's a little bit out of the way. It also would provide us an indoor space. We have weather issues in Vermont. You know, it's nice to say, let's go to the church, but the church isn't always unlocked. So we don't want to use that building because we're not always guaranteed to have someone with a key to let them in. There's usually someone at Father's, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So that's a place we can open the garage and put kids inside temporarily. So that's going to be our evacuation site. So any kid who exits the building during this emergency will be told to go there. We will practice that over and over and over. Because ultimately, if you're starting to evacuate kids and a situation changes, you might get half the kids out, half the kids may have to stay in a lockdown situation. We may not have an adult with those kids. They may not have an adult with them. That you may be running out the door and all of a sudden 5 or 10 kids have left and you hear a noise that makes you think, I can't keep doing this. You might switch your protocol right then and there, and those kids that are out will know to go there. That's a big deal. That's going to take a lot of practice, a lot of time. But we also recognize that that's that many less targets that our intruder has. So it's going to take practice, and that's why we're starting this process. We don't believe we're going to do this one time and everyone will be a master. This is something we'll be building on for a long, long time. So the idea is that we get everyone out of the building. That is our rally point. Afterwards, once we've had enough time to get a group of people, we'll have another location that will be the relocation point. That'll be somewhere further away from the school where parents could come and pick up students in the event of an emergency. For us, it's going to be St. Stephen's, which is just a walk across the main street parish. It's probably from here about a 4.5-minute walk. Well, that's 2 minutes at the light, so about a 6.5-minute walk as you wait to cross Main Street. The reason we're using that is twofold. One, there's a large parking lot, so as parents arrive, you have room to park. You're going to want to come and obviously speak to your children and deal with the emotional trauma they may be experiencing. It's also got restroom facilities and ability to keep people safe. That would be after we all evacuate, we'd wait a certain amount of time, and then all the kids and all the adults that were at that rally point would walk over as one mass group. Hopefully at that point the police have come, but then they're setting up a perimeter, then they're dealing with all of the things that go with making sure this event is truly over. So again, the idea is that the adults are making that decision. So armed intruder enters the building, shots are heard, someone comes over the loudspeaker and says, we've seen them in the cafeteria, we hope all these people on this end get out. So when that person swings around to go down here, there's nobody left for him to find. Even if he starts entering classrooms, there's no people here. So evacuate is kind of the priority, but again, we recognize it's all about the information you have. And that's the big key. We want the adults in the room to try to make the most informed decision. And that was one of the biggest hiccups in this training, was trying to help the adults understand that's a lot of responsibility. There are going to be times when you're going to do something that feels unnatural, but you have to do what's best for your kids. There's a lot of questions of, what do you do if a kid won't go? The protocol is you leave them there. Because the reality is one kid in a room is not likely to be noticed, but you as an adult with a crying kid in the corner or 10 kids is something that's going to be attractive to an active intruder. And that's really hard to swallow as a caring adult. It's really hard to say, I feel comfortable with that. But what we're recognizing is that, again, the research has told us these folks are typically looking for mass casualty opportunities. They're not looking for 1 or 2 students. So if they see or hear one kid, they may even open the door, look, and leave. A lot of times they're not interested. They want to inflict a great deal of harm rather than deal with one particular student. So that's a big tough part of this, but that's why we want to start this practice and do it over and over, because we don't want kids to have that fear response. We hope that they will respond appropriately and will follow our directions and do what we need them to do. Okay. This is our to-go bucket. In the event that a lockdown occurs and you're not able to evacuate, it can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 8 hours to clear a school. One of the things that has been come up is, what do you do for kids when you're not allowed to leave to go to the bathroom? How do you handle that? What other materials do you need to manage? So these are to-go buckets. This is actually a toilet seat on top of a 5-gallon bucket. Inside there's a number of supplies for kids to occupy themselves. There's a shower curtain to put up to create a private bathroom area to the best of your ability. And there's all kinds of other materials in there to keep kids safe and to give them things to do should they be trapped. When the Essex event happened many years ago, I believe it took 9 hours to clear the building, 8 or 9 hours before the entire building was considered safe. So there were kids in the building for 6 or 7 hours not being prepared for that event, not recognizing that they were going to be there for that long. So the community has come together. Actually, the local Girl Scout troop took this on as a project and actually made one of these for every classroom. So we're very thankful to them. So it's something that we have now as a resource. It's something we'll be talking to the kids about and sharing with them. Again, the whole point is to make them informed and to make them aware and to work with them to be prepared. There's a great book that we'll be using with the little kids that says, "I'm prepared, I'm not scared." And it's all about being ready. It's all about understanding in a scary situation, we want you to be ready to do what you need to do and not afraid of what's going to happen. So we're thinking about this in the short term and in the long term and for the safety of our students. So there's a lot going into this. There's a lot of work to be done. With the kids, we'll be doing it one component at a time. So we won't say the first day that this is happening, everybody do what you think is best. We will focus on one specific aspect and everybody will practice that aspect. Then we'll do it again and we'll focus on another aspect and everybody will do that aspect. As we get more comfortable and it becomes second nature, then we'll start to throw in a little bit of, mystery is not the right word, but a little less information will be available so that people can start to practice what to do and how to make those decisions, and we'll build up to making it a little more realistic each time. We do have the support of the local resource officer here in Winooski. He was present during our adult training and is very excited that we're making this change and is actually pushing very hard for Winooski to make this change. We also have many police officers here that are students here, so we have a lot of law enforcement support. One parent who's a state trooper was also here during our training and was very happy to hear we're making this change and making this switch, and has been very supportive from a law enforcement perspective on what we would expect and the kind of things that could happen. So just talking about what we're going to do with our students. Obviously, we have to do this age appropriately. I can't sit down with one big room of kids and try to give this information because it's not going to work. The biggest things we'll be stressing with the kids are that clear vocabulary. That's going to be the hardest task in this, is to help kids. 8th graders, 7th graders, no problem. You're going to hear what you're going to hear and you're going to respond. Kindergartners, 1st graders, some of them are going to know, some of them are not. So it's going to be helping them understand when they hear something like that, what's the response, who can help them, how can they get clarification. It's also going to be understanding the importance of the directions. If I don't hear a direction, what do I do? How do I get information? What happens if I'm confused? What do I do if I'm scared? It's going to be a long process. We're going to take the next, basically, month to have these conversations. Our goal is in March to do our first actual drill here at St. Francis. It will be planned. You'll hear about it. You'll know about it. We will tell you the day. We will tell you in advance when it's coming. It will not be a surprise. It will not be a surprise to the students. It will be a very planned, very organized activity. The first thing we'll be working on is the lockdown with the extra steps, because we're familiar with lockdown, right? We haven't seen the extra steps yet, but our students are very familiar with lockdown. So we're going to start with what will be the easiest transition for them. And then we'll build up to some of the other parts with information and evacuation and all that. Counter will be something we won't practice school-wide. We will work with middle school students on that idea. We will probably talk about it in 3rd and 4th grade a little bit to kind of say, hey, if you happen to be sitting next to something, don't hesitate to kind of grab it. But With little kids, that won't be something we go over. And then we'll be building up to obviously trying to do the whole thing as the information comes. The whole point of this meeting is so that you can help us with this. We know it's going to bring up tough conversations. We know it's going to bring up questions. We know it's a hard conversation to have. Maybe some of you have already had it in your own workplaces and you're familiar with it, or you have another protocol similar to this for your workplace. If you don't, I recommend you talk to whoever's in charge of safety at your workplace and ask them what the plan is in the event of an active shooter. It's a great thing to know. There's kind of 3 prescribed systems that go with. Alice is one, run, hide, fight is one, and there's another one that the government's been using, and the name just escapes me, but I just saw it the other day. All the same philosophy about kind of having options and making choices, just laid out differently depending on the environment you're in. We really like Alice because of the way it works for students and because of the options it gives us and the way it's broken down. So like I said, we'll be building up to that, and we want your concerns. If your student comes home and is concerned about something or has a question unanswered, we want to know. The last thing we want is kids to feel uncertain about this program. I've never had a kid come to me and say, why do we do fire drills? Or that doesn't seem, because the kids know, but we do it over years and years and they learn about it and they understand it. This is going to be that same process, but it's going to be a lot different because kids aren't going to be starting when they're little. We're going to be jumping in with kids of all different ages, many of whom are very aware of the community around them and the atmosphere they live in and the dangers that exist. And so it is going to incite some tough conversation. It is going to incite some fear and some worry. So please, we want to be your partner in this. We don't want you to feel like you have to answer all these questions. You have to have these tough conversations. I'm certainly more than willing to have them. Ms. B is certainly more than willing to have them. The teachers are more than willing to have them, or if they're not, will come and find us, and we will make sure that we support the students. And we want them asking questions. This skill is not something we see as just for school. It's something we see for life. We hope our students will go out into the world around them and will be cognizant when they enter movie theaters, restaurants, shopping malls. If we're all thinking this way, eventually these things will stop happening because we'll all know what to do and we'll all make better choices, and hopefully we won't have to worry about this in the years to come. I know one question that comes up all the time is, if you're teaching all the students this and one of your students ends up being the active shooter, doesn't that tell them everything they need to know about what's going to happen? The answer is yes. Yes, it does. However, that's why this system is great, because there's still only one individual and they can still only cover so much ground. And so the rest of us can respond to that information and continue to keep kids safe. Another popular question that's come up, and this happened recently in Florida, was the mass shooting involved the student pulling the fire alarm, and then the fire alarm response was had. One of the things we're talking about as a community is that maybe we need to take an extra 10 seconds during a fire drill to take a peek. Just look out your door. Just listen for a minute. Is there anything that you're hearing or seeing that seems out of the ordinary when you're having a fire drill? I don't think that extra 30 seconds of checking is going to put anybody in danger at that point. So interesting to think about. And yes, unfortunately, these things will continue to happen. People will come up with new strategies. The nice part about Alice is it's adaptable on the fly. If some new information comes along, if a new research comes along, then we can make those changes within this protocol to meet the needs of our students and to improve their safety. So, now that I've thrown all that information at you, are there any questions I can answer about this information I've shared, or anything that is nerve-wracking to you or worrisome or concerning?
I have a question.
Julie, sure.
Some schools have implemented this, have also done post-activity processing.
Yes.
With either like a psychologist or something like that. And that would be more for some of the more advanced practice. Would
Yeah.
you be doing that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have access to psychologists, unfortunately. We will always have a debrief session that occurs after every activity for us to talk with the students about what happened and why it happened, and if they have any questions. I will be debriefing on a regular basis with the faculty to see what went well, what didn't go well, what we need to change. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they need to be just as involved and invested in this as we are. This is not one of those where you do this because I say so. They really need to recognize why we're doing it and how important it is to do it, because we need full buy-in. You just don't want a student to say, well, I don't believe this, so I'm not going to do it, because that's just not going to work. So yes, if there were large concern, someone was really having an anxious response, then I would certainly see what other resources I could reach out to try to meet them. I mean, step one would be reaching out to you as the family to say, your child really had an adverse effect to this. Certainly down the road, we would certainly invite parents to come. A lot of schools will cordon off a small area where they can have spectators so they can see the process. A lot of times if kids know their parents can witness it, it kind of takes some of that stress away. So it's more of a, we have to react to what we see. So yes, absolutely. But we will always have a debrief after the fact because we want to make sure that there aren't questions or confusion or misguided information because those decisions are life and death, obviously. So it's really important that kids are clear on what we're looking for and what we can do to make sure that they feel comfortable with the situation. So any other questions?
Sort of two questions.
Sure.
One is, when do you intend to fully implement Alice? And then the second question is, are you currently practicing lockdown now with students?
Yes.
Or are you pausing so the transition's a little easier?
So I'll answer both questions. We've been continuing to practice traditional lockdown as of this month. This will be our last traditional lockdown of the year. We're required by law to have them, so I can't stop them to say, I want to take a break. The goal for us is really full implementation by next September. The goal is to have a couple of these, and then even in the early part, probably the first one we do coming back from September would still be well planned out. We might have multiple options on the table, but we would still take our time. For me to kind of think where are we going to be when we would have full implementation where it would be surprised would probably be about a year from now. But I don't want to set that timetable if there's major concerns, if something goes awry, if a question comes, if students are having major adverse effect, then I might have to look at that timetable and say, okay, wait a minute, am I putting my students in jeopardy by pushing this too quickly? I have a feeling they're going to be very open and excited about it, and so I might even be able to push the timetable up if the response is positive and kids really buy in and get it, I don't want to say get excited, but really understand why we're making this choice. But we're going to tackle that one step at a time. Our March, what did we say, 16th, I think, on the top of my head. I think March, yeah. So we'll send that out, but in the second week of March or so, we're going to do our very first one, and we'll let all of you know ahead of time so you know it's coming. Again, it'll only be one component of it. We'll have had a month of conversations leading up to it to prepare students. It'll be very casual and calm in nature. We'll explain this is happening, we're going to practice this, your teachers are going to instruct you on specifically what you need to do. We might even do it 2 or 3 times in a row. We might do it quickly, see what went well, and say, we're going to try this again. Everyone go back, and we may end up doing that depending on how kind of the conversations have gone and what we get. I mean, I'll be meeting with my teachers in another couple of weeks to see how the conversations have gone. I'll see what conversations I have with students and certainly with parents. As quite more questions arise, it may change how we go forward. The purpose of this meeting is we want you on board. We want you knowing what's going on. We want you to be part of this with us. As I said, we don't want anyone coming home and saying, guess what I learned in school today? We really want you to know what's going on. And I do, if you have questions even after the fact, even after we debrief, if something comes up at home and you're just not sure how to answer it or you need more details, please let us know, and we'll happily get you the information you need to share this information with your children and to help them understand. I will recommend the Alice website. It's available to the public. It's full of great information and stuff to look at. I will certainly make this presentation available, and if my video didn't come out awful, we'll certainly get that shared on YouTube so that other parents who aren't here can watch it and sharing this information. I love to say I know how it's all going to go, but I just don't. School, we've been doing it in Vermont for a little while. The Catholic Diocese has decided as a whole that they're going to be doing it. So what's really nice is once they learn it here, they'll be using it at Rice. So they won't be relearning it. They'll just be changing the environment they're in. Some schools in southern Vermont have been doing it for a long time, and they've had very positive results so far. I'm hoping we'll have the same situation, but every school has different makeup, different situations to evolve, and practice makes perfect. But I think, and the faculty can certainly prescribe to this, we started by doing a traditional lockdown, and the awful feeling you get sitting in a corner as I'm coming in the room with my Nerf gun and I'm just standing there going like this without any effort and how many people I can hit. It was pretty hard to feel comfortable, and you start doing this training and you wonder to yourself, why did we ever think huddling up as a mass was a great and safe solution for our children? So, and I think the children will see that same result. They've done a lot of lockdowns, especially our older kids. Once they see this, and they'll start to wonder, like, I wonder why we did it that way before. So I do think it's going to do a lot for our community. I do think it's going to make our students think about safety a little bit more, and I don't think that can hurt us in today's environment. So, other questions I can answer?
So I know you mentioned you're going to have like a targeted or stepped training process. You're going to go through one piece at a time. Once you're fully implemented, you know, say it's a year from now, next March, what is the plan for ongoing maintenance? New students coming in, are they going to learn at that same one piece at a time level, or are they going to be bombarded with all the information?
No, unfortunately, we'll probably have to do it more as a full information piece, but we're going to have to do it kind of in the same way we would do classroom rules and expectations. We're going to have to roll it into that, into some way, shape, or form. Again, not knowing all the caveats yet, I can't answer that fully because it's going to depend on what our pitfalls are, or stumbling blocks are, and what pieces we need to cover differently. But I see it kind of being part of the classroom orientation. You know, as you come into class, this is what the safety protocol, this is how we do it, this is what we do. You know, for a lot of our younger kids, they're not going to understand it. Our 3 and 4-year-olds are mostly going to react to what the adult's asking them. So it'll be starting kind of in kindergarten where we can have a little more in-depth conversation. A lot of our kindergartners are just going to respond to what the adults ask them to do, which is wonderful. But yeah, it's an interesting question that I have to tackle as we go through it. But it won't be something that we just say, we do Alice and we'll never talk about it. It'll have to be an important step in our initial start of the year stuff that we do, and that will be something we'll work on as we go. And again, we'll try to do our best to keep you informed as families about how we're handling it. And like anything else, after a summer off and not thinking about it, we can all use that refresher. We can all use that reminder of what the protocols are. And to be honest, every room in the school is different. It has different opportunities. You know, the difference of being on the first floor to the second floor, and certainly that provides different challenges, and where you are in location to exits, and do you know what's the closest exit to where you are provides different challenges. So it's going to be necessary for us to review those spaces. The other issue we're going to have to tackle over time is areas where their kids aren't typically. So what do you do when you're in an art room where you might be once a week? How do we make sure every class knows what to do when they're there? What do you do when you're in Spanish or the music room? What do you do when you're in the cafeteria during a lunch period and there's a mix of students there with one adult? So there are going to be areas we have to work on. There are going to be things that we have to teach the kids over time after they know the protocol. Is going to have to be, okay, what do you do when you're in this room? What do you do when you're in that room? So that's why I'm saying a year. I'm hoping it'll go quicker than that, but I recognize that there are many hurdles to get over. There are many things for us to still figure out. The goal for step 1 is just to get them familiar with it, to use the terms, to get comfortable with the situation, and then to spread that knowledge from there. So,
will it be the same bi-monthly training process that you do with the fire drills?
yes. Yes, it will. And usually in September we do one of each. So we start the year with one fire drill and one safety drill, and then we alternate months as best we can based on the weather. Sometimes it's really hard to do a fire drill when it's negative 17 outside, but we do our best. David?
Your doors open out.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, in terms of barricades, are you going to have like a sleeve or a band on the bucket for locking the
We're still working out the best system for every classroom as far as what works. You know, one of the things they talk about in the situation is use what you have. Every room is different. You know, we talked about bungees, we've talked about cables, we've talked about other ways to kind of block it out. So we're still figuring out the best way. Some of our doors are nice and new, some of our doors are very old and provide their own challenges. Some rooms have lots of heavy furniture and students to move them. Others have no furniture and it's very light, and so things change. So we're still working out what we can do. We spend a lot of time talking about classroom setup. What can you keep nearby that you can use to help you, if you have a heavy filing cabinet, can you bungee that to the door handle and back to the cabinet so when you pull you get a little bit of resistance. So, and there's also a lot of things that have to be upgraded. I mean, I wouldn't be being honest with you if I said our school is 100% and perfectly in safety. We have some doors and things that we have to look at as a school as far as how we're going to move forward. Some of our doors are old and when these things weren't an issue. We have doors in here from 1933 that locking them was not even, like, no one considered it, or some of them need skeleton keys as their main form. So we've got some work to do in that regard. You know, one of the things we're looking at is getting ladders for the second floor windows so kids could climb out in the case of an emergency. So there's a lot for us to consider. So, you know, we want to give them the tools and the knowledge first, and then we'll want to work to update the building to try to match those needs as quickly as possible with the resources that we have. But Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, some of the materials will definitely be in the bucket. Some will be stored where the proximity where the teacher feels most comfortable to access them. You certainly don't want someone to have to root through a drawer and try to find what they need in an emergency situation. We want sort of our faculty and staff to kind of look at their space and what they feel most comfortable doing in the sense of an emergency. And again, in a room where there are older kids, you might be able to leave things close by and they can grab them and do it. Where in a younger kid room, it's kind of on the teacher, so they might have a different method. But yes, absolutely, we do have issues with doors opening out. We obviously have issues with doors with glass. Glass is not bulletproof, so that provides a challenge as well. So, barricades are what they are. They're temporary to slow things down, but they're not unpenetrable. So that's why we try to lean on evacuation as the main goal, and then anything else we're doing is just to slow that person down in the hopes of getting an appropriate response here to take care of the situation. So, Colleen?
How is the threat being described to the younger kids? Because obviously they're not going to be as aware of what's been happening with the older kids.
Yeah, we're still working out exactly what terms we're going to use. We need to be clear and concise, but we're not exactly sure. There definitely be things like armed intruder is kind of what the term I'm favoring right now. We may get away from that. We may practice it and find that word's just not good enough or it doesn't elicit the right response. We're going to talk as the teachers discuss with their students sort of about this. We'll see what kind of terms come up. Surprisingly enough, they have a much bigger vocabulary than I'm always expecting when it comes to these types of things. We want clear words, we just don't want to panic them. So it's finding that balance of this is a clear, informative word that's going to give them information, but not say, okay, there's a man with a gun. We want to be very careful, but I also don't want the adult in the room not to know what they're dealing with. Armed intruder could be like, what if he has a knife? What if he has a bomb strapped to his chest? I get that I'm talking Hollywood movies now, but you just never know what they could have, so you want to be careful because there's a big difference between a man with a knife and a man with a gun. So it's still something we're working out. It may be something we try the first time and we end up not liking it, and the students get upset about the word we choose, and we try something different the next time. So that's the best answer I have as of right now. It's a great question, though. Any other questions I can answer? Anything else?
Well, I have a question,
Sure.
and I understand that this meeting is more about understanding the program and the implementation of what the folks are doing. But I've often wondered, the past few years, we've had situations locally, and as I'm sitting there watching the news, I often wonder what St. Francis knows right now, what's happening in the community, just as far as your relationship with the police. If a bank is being robbed down the road, do they inform you so that you are aware? It's just a...
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer to your question is yes, if they feel we're in danger. So about 4 years ago, there was a lockdown incident at Winooski after school, and we did receive a call, and they actually asked us to go on a lockdown as well because they were concerned about the person at the situation. So typically we do find out. Often, a lot of times you're finding out and letting us know before the authorities are. As parents, if they don't feel we're in the initial threat zone, they typically don't reach out. But we do have a standing relationship with the Winooski resource officer. He would probably be the first officer here should a situation comes. He's very familiar with the building. They have access. They have all of our keys and things on site at their disposal. I'm working on getting them keys to put in all the cars so that if they're driving around and they don't have to go back to the station and then come to us, so we're working on that. So typically we are. Unfortunately, you're at the mercy of the person deciding what constitutes a threat that needs to be alerted, and that's sometimes something we don't have control over. So we are informed. We do typically know what's going on in the greater community, and they do want us to respond appropriately to those concerns. But unfortunately, in a small town, sometimes the response is all directed at the event and not always great about letting us know. But we have a great relationship with our city, with our police force, and they're very in tune to us being here and making sure our students are safe. So,
Is it the same within the Catholic, the school systems? If something's happening at Rice, and unfortunate if it's a parent who has children at both schools, if they're in distress about a situation, if they're causing the situation, is there communication between the schools with this school may all of a sudden be?
yeah, we're on both the Rice and Colchester call list for events that occur. So if a call goes out to parents, it comes to us as well. I don't have that reciprocity with like a Christ the King or a Monte Cristi, but like we do get calls from Rice when something's going on. We do get calls typically from Colchester when something's going on. So yes, we typically know. Again, like anything else, it depends on what response they elicit and how we're informed. If it's something they keep locally that they choose not to inform, or they focus on just making it about the immediacy, then we don't always get that information. You know, I know the situation earlier in the year, we didn't get that information right off the bat with those particular students and that incident that occurred because they were focused on protecting the community there. And the threat was not likely to impact us immediately, so we did eventually get the call letting us know what happened. But in case of a mass shooting, I would assume as soon as an alert went out, we would be on that list and be receiving that information. But I could double check that. I would have to talk to Mrs. Lorenz and make sure. It's a good question. It's a great question. I mean, it's a whole new world that we're all still figuring out too, and thinking about how to best support each other through these processes. So it's a very good question for sure. Anything else I can answer? All right, well, thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. If you have any other questions, let me know. Please feel free to contact us at any time. Again, we'll be keeping you in the loop as we move forward. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time. And if any other questions come up, please let me know. Otherwise, safe travels, and we'll see everybody bright and early tomorrow morning.